Tonight, we descend once more into the Black Vault, where the forgotten meets the declassified. These are not the UFO cases you've heard about. No Roswell, no Phoenix Lights. These are the incidents that slipped through the cracks of history, logged, archived, and buried in routine paperwork until someone like John Greenwald Jr. came asking questions. Since 1996, Greenwald has built the largest civilian archive of declassified government documents, page by page, using the Freedom of Information Act as his only weapon. What he's uncovered isn't Hollywood drama. It's radar logs that don't match flight plans, security reports filed at 3 a.m, air defense summaries marked unresolved and left to gather dust. This is raw evidence, preserved exactly as military personnel recorded it, no theories added, no drama injected, just the cold, procedural language of people who saw something they couldn't explain. Tonight's episode focuses on 10 cases that share a disturbing pattern: objects detected on radar with no visual confirmation, visual sightings with no radar returns, and incidents where both sensors and human eyes agreed on one terrifying fact: something was there, and it shouldn't have been. Our first case takes us to the heart of Cold War America, where the fear of Soviet aircraft kept radar screens glowing 24 hours a day. Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma, 1958. A strategic air command facility responsible for maintaining bombers that carried America's nuclear deterrent. On a routine monitoring shift, operators detected something on primary radar. A return with no transponder, no flight plan, and no explanation. The object appeared within controlled military airspace. Operators ran through standard protocols, adjusted gain settings, checked for equipment malfunction, ruled out weather interference. The return persisted. Then it vanished. Minutes later, it reappeared in a different location. Same altitude, same signal strength. This wasn't a plane following an air corridor. It was appearing and disappearing at discrete points, as if testing the limits of detection. Nearby radar stations were contacted. None reported corresponding tracks. Civil aviation confirmed no unauthorized aircraft in the region. The object exhibited no continuous movement between positions, just intermittent appearances across controlled airspace. Without visual confirmation or sustained tracking, interceptors weren't scrambled. The contact was logged, documented in an internal memorandum, and archived without resolution. What makes this case significant isn't what was found, it's what wasn't. No follow-up investigation was ordered. No changes to radar procedures were implemented. The incident never reached Project Blue Book. It simply became another entry in routine air defense documentation, forgotten until the Black Vault retrieved it decades later. This is the nature of the shadow archives. Not every anomaly prompted investigation. Not every unexplained event generated headlines. Most were recorded once, filed away, and left to history. But when examined collectively, these forgotten cases reveal a pattern. Unidentified radar contacts were not rare. They were routine, and many remain unresolved to this day. 1957. Barksdale Air Force Base, Louisiana. Home to Strategic Air Command's long-range bomber wings, aircraft capable of delivering nuclear payloads anywhere on Earth. The base operated under elevated security protocols. Any unauthorized penetration of controlled airspace wasn't just an aviation anomaly. It was a potential act of war. During overnight operations, primary radar detected a target crossing into restricted airspace. No transponder, no identification, no scheduled flight activity matched the contact. Security personnel at perimeter observation posts reported visual confirmation, a single lighted object moving silently above the base perimeter. No engine noise, no navigation lights, no exhaust trail. The object remained within restricted airspace briefly before exiting along a trajectory inconsistent with established departure corridors. Once outside controlled airspace, radar contact was lost. The incident was documented in base security logs, but notably it was never labeled a UFO. Instead, it was categorized as an unidentified airspace violation, a security breach, not a phenomenon. This terminology reveals something crucial about how the military processed these events. By classifying them as security anomalies rather than unexplained phenomena, they effectively removed them from investigative programs like Project Blue Book. The Air Force treated unauthorized airspace access as an operational issue, not a scientific mystery. Events that didn't escalate or recur were documented once and archived. The Barksdale case demonstrates a filtering system that kept many incidents invisible. Unless an event generated public attention, involved aircraft interaction, or repeated itself, it remained buried in operational records. The Black Vault's systematic FOIA requests targeting broader record categories, base security logs, airspace violation reports, have begun to unearth these hidden cases. What emerges is unsettling. Simultaneous radar and visual confirmation of an object with no transponder, no engine noise, and no correlation to known aircraft. The documentation doesn't speculate. It doesn't assign blame or origin. It simply records an airspace violation that departed without identification. Now we move to a place where America tested its most advanced technology, White Sands Missile Range, New Mexico, 1963. This wasn't just any test facility. It was one of the most instrumented environments on Earth, equipped with high-speed cameras, radar arrays, and telemetry receivers designed to track missiles with surgical precision. During routine monitoring, technicians reviewing optical tracking footage identified something anomalous. An object appeared in multiple consecutive frames, traversing the field of view at high apparent speed. It didn't match any scheduled test, aircraft flight, or space object transit. The object's motion across successive frames suggested physical traversal through space, not a film defect. Standard review procedures were initiated. Film stock was examined for scratches or chemical irregularities, camera mechanisms were checked for shutter malfunction, no defects were found. The object's exposure characteristics were consistent with external illumination, not internal reflection. Its linear motion ruled out stationary artifacts. Range personnel attempted correlation with known air traffic. Flight logs confirmed no aircraft were authorized in the restricted airspace. Civil aviation reported no commercial traffic. Military schedules showed no matching sorties. Weather data indicated clear conditions with no atmospheric disturbances. Balloon launches were ruled out based on trajectory characteristics. An internal technical note documented the anomaly with procedural caution. The object was described as unidentified, but classified as an instrumentation anomaly pending explanation. This reflected White Sands policy. Unexplained sensor data was treated as a technical issue unless additional corroboration emerged. The footage was retained briefly, then archived according to standard film retention practices. Many reels from that era were reused or discarded unless they contained critical data. Only written summaries referencing the anomaly remain. No follow-up investigation was ordered. Without repetition or corroborating data, the case was closed administratively. What's striking is the controlled environment. This was a test corridor designed to measure and document aerospace activity with extreme precision. Yet something appeared, was recorded, reviewed by technical personnel, and left unexplained. It demonstrates that even in environments built to eliminate uncertainty, unexplained observations still occurred and were quietly archived without public disclosure. The year is 1960. The location, Chibougamau, Quebec, a remote region of eastern Canada where radar stations monitored vast stretches of sparsely populated terrain under NORAD frameworks. Any aerial activity in this area stood out sharply against the silence. When radar operators detected an unidentified target during routine operations, they paid close attention. The contact appeared on primary radar with no transponder response. No scheduled military flights were operating nearby. What made this case unusual was the object's behavior. It maintained altitude while executing abrupt vertical changes inconsistent with conventional aircraft. The target didn't follow established routes. Instead, it showed discrete altitude shifts while remaining within a confined geographic area. Standard verification procedures were initiated. System calibration was checked. Signal stability confirmed. Interference levels ruled out. The contact persisted across multiple radar sweeps. Weather data indicated no atmospheric disturbances known to produce spurious returns. The signal strength remained consistent, suggesting a stable radar cross-section. Then came the visual reports. Ground-based personnel in the Chibougamau region reported seeing an aerial light, a luminous object moving silently across the sky with no navigation lights or blinking patterns. Its movement appeared controlled, not drifting. The timing of the visual observation coincided with the radar contact, a temporal overlap noted in internal reports as particularly significant. But here's where it gets strange. The radar indicated abrupt altitude changes. Visual observers described smooth lateral motion. The data didn't align. Ground-based observers lacked reliable reference points for altitude estimation, especially at night over forested terrain. This discrepancy became the defining feature of the case. Adjacent radar stations were consulted. None reported corresponding returns. Civil aviation confirmed no unauthorized aircraft. Without sustained tracking or clear data correlation, interceptors weren't scrambled. The incident was documented as an unresolved air defense anomaly and archived without further investigation. The Chibougamau case illustrates a recurring challenge in air defense monitoring. Sensor data and human observation don't always agree. When they diverge, it limits the ability to draw firm conclusions. This wasn't oversight, it was operational reality. The event didn't escalate, didn't recur, didn't impact readiness, so it was filed away. Now we shift to the icy edge of the Arctic. 1973, Keflavik Air Base, Iceland. One of NATO's most strategic installations guarding the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap. Any unidentified track entering this corridor required immediate attention. When radar operators detected an unknown contact approaching monitored airspace, standard procedures were initiated. The track maintained altitude and speed long enough to justify escalation. Some radar stations reported brief returns, others detected nothing. The partial correlation was documented as a limiting factor. With the strategic importance of the region, interceptor launch procedures were initiated. Aircraft were placed on standby. Pilots received preliminary briefings. Then the object changed. Radar operators observed a rapid increase in speed and a trajectory shift that diverged from earlier movement. The reported acceleration exceeded the intercept capabilities of available aircraft. Command authorities reassessed. NATO doctrine required intercepts to be feasible and safe. The updated data suggested the target couldn't be intercepted within operational parameters. The intercept was aborted. Shortly after, radar contact was lost. The track didn't continue along a predictable path and didn't reappear in adjacent sectors. No communication or identification response was ever received. No visual sightings accompanied the radar detection. The incident remained entirely sensor-based. An operational report summarized the detection, verification attempts, and abort decision using neutral language. The object was described as an unidentified aerial track. No assumptions were made regarding origin or intent. The report noted the object didn't violate Icelandic airspace and didn't demonstrate hostile behavior. The Keflavik case is significant because it shows how NATO air defense systems managed uncertainty in strategically sensitive regions. The incident didn't trigger escalation. It was handled as an operational matter, documented and archived. No pilot debriefings exist. No technical analyses are available. The case remains defined by brief operational references. What these northern cases reveal is a pattern. During the Cold War, unidentified aerial tracks were monitored seriously and responded to methodically, even when they didn't result in engagement. The phenomenon adapted to new settings, appearing not just over remote farms but near critical defense installations. And the response was always the same: document, assess, archive. October 1973, Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. The hills and valleys erupted with sightings, glowing discs hovering over farms, luminous spheres drifting through tree lines, beams of light reaching down from the sky. Families watched, police officers pursued. Hunters described tall figures moving with unnatural gaits. Stan Gordon, a young investigator from Greensburg, worked tirelessly to document every report. His phone rang constantly. Notebooks filled with witness statements. County maps were marked with pins showing sighting locations. Local newspapers published stories. Police dispatchers fielded calls they couldn't explain. One farmer described a disc hovering over his pasture, sending beams through fog, startling cattle. Another family watched a glowing object cross Route 30 so low it illuminated their car's interior. But the sightings were only half the story. Soon after reports reached the press, witnesses began describing visitors, men in dark suits who arrived unannounced, asking precise questions. What time did the object appear? How many people saw it? Were photographs taken? When witnesses hesitated, the men repeated details back to them. Details shared with no one but Gordon. One family who watched a sphere drift over their cornfield received a visit. The men asked if they'd spoken to reporters. When told yes, their demeanor hardened. That was unwise. One said flatly, "You should avoid speaking further." A retired steel worker who called police about lights above a quarry was visited by men claiming to represent the Air Force. When he later called the Air Force detachment to verify, he was told no investigators had been sent. None showed badges. None carried identification. Yet their tone carried authority that left families frightened into silence. Witnesses noted something uncanny, speech that was flat and inflectionless, as if read from a script. Movements were stiff, faces expressionless. One witness told Gordon the men spoke like they were learning the language as they went. As weeks passed, the pattern became clear. Witnesses who'd spoken openly now grew silent. Farmers withdrew statements. Families refused further questions. Gordon noticed calls ending abruptly. Witnesses cancelling meetings suddenly. Some refused to open doors when he arrived. One woman who reported a landing near her property called Gordon in tears. Men had come asking invasive questions, not just about the sighting, but about her family, her children, her routines. It felt like they already knew everything, she said. Another man who'd shown Gordon scorched ground later became hostile, insisting the mark was from a brush fire, though his earlier testimony had been detailed and clear. Officially little was said. Project Blue Book was in its final year. Witnesses were told Air Force men might contact them, but those who experienced these visits described behavior that didn't match standard Air Force procedure. No documentation, no credentials, no paperwork. When Gordon reached out to military contacts, he was told no official teams had been sent to Westmoreland County. The psychological impact was severe. Witnesses felt hunted. Farmers avoided phones. Families drew curtains during daylight. Children grew anxious when unfamiliar cars slowed near homes. A state trooper admitted off-record he'd been warned not to stick his neck out about the chase he'd given a glowing object. Gordon later reflected that the hardest part wasn't the number of sightings, it was the number of silences. Cases that should have been documented were cut short. Witnesses who could have offered testimony withdrew into fear. The Westmoreland County wave is remembered as one of the most significant regional UFO flaps in American history. But its legacy isn't just the lights reported across Pennsylvania hills. It's the quiet that followed. The case demonstrated how Men in Black activity could magnify a UFO wave's impact, not by explaining or debunking it, but by suppressing it. Witness after witness withdrew, leaving gaps in the record that could never be filled. Extraordinary events could be seen by dozens, but a handful of quiet visitors could erase those voices as effectively as any official denial. Similar patterns emerged in Gulf Breeze, Florida during the 1980s. After contractor Ed Walters photographed alleged UFOs, the town became a hotspot. But alongside the sightings came reports of mysterious phone calls, warnings not to speak to media, dark sedans parked at odd hours. Witnesses described men in black suits arriving unannounced, questioning them not about crafts, but about investigators they'd spoken to. One couple who photographed strange lights received a knock. Two men with unusually pale skin and blank expressions demanded the photos. "You will not need them. They are not yours to keep." Intimidated, the couple handed them over. The photos were never seen again. These encounters mirrored decades of prior reports, suggesting the phenomenon wasn't random, it was systematic. The final cases in tonight's episode take us across oceans and decades, revealing that this pattern of documentation and silence was global. 1968, Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota. Security personnel at remote missile sites reported glowing objects hovering near silos. A B-52 bomber returning from training was directed to investigate. The crew tracked an enormous object on radar, larger than their bomber, capable of sudden acceleration no known aircraft could achieve. The object paced alongside them, maintaining formation before darting away. Ground teams continued reporting objects over missile fields, some emitting beams downward as if inspecting the silos. Radar operators confirmed the presence. Multiple independent witnesses, airmen, bomber crew, ground security, all described the same thing. Project Blue Book labeled it unidentified, then attempted to attribute sightings to stars or atmospheric phenomena despite radar confirmation and close-range descriptions. 1950, Fairchild Air Force Base, Washington. Airmen conducting routine checks saw a strange light approaching. It moved silently, stopped abruptly, and hovered, a disc-shaped craft glowing faintly. Radar picked up a strong return. A P-61 Black Widow was scrambled. The pilot achieved visual contact, but when he attempted to close distance, the object shot away at extraordinary speed, then accelerated vertically and vanished. Multiple witnesses, radar confirmation, attempted interception, all documented, all unexplained. December 1980, RAF Bentwaters, England. The most thoroughly documented case of all. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt and his security team investigated strange lights in Rendlesham Forest. Holt brought a tape recorder. For 18 minutes, he captured their encounter with a pulsing red object, maneuvering through trees, radiation readings at a landing site, and beams of light shooting downward, one landing at their feet. "This is unreal," Holt's voice says on the recording. Multiple lights appeared, maneuvering at impossible angles. The audio is genuine, unedited, verified. Ground impressions photographed at the scene showed a tripod pattern. Radiation levels were elevated. Multiple airmen submitted sworn affidavits. Decades later, Colonel Holt stated publicly, "This was not imagination. I saw it. Many others saw it. It was real." Yet neither the US nor UK governments have offered an explanation. No aircraft missing, no tests scheduled. Clear weather, real radar blips, real audio, real witnesses. Unsolved. 1957, Edwards Air Force Base, California. The Mojave Desert cradle of supersonic innovation. High-speed cameras used for flight documentation captured something glinting in the sky. A round, silvery object with no wings or tail. It moved silently, paused above the base, then shot upward at a sharp angle, leaving no vapor trail. Radar registered a brief return. Pilots on the tarmac saw it. Film analysis confirmed a real three-dimensional airborne source, not a reflection or artifact. Attic labeled it unidentified. The film was never released. 1971, Diego Garcia, Indian Ocean. Personnel at this isolated military installation reported a luminous object transiting near the island at low altitude. No engine noise, no navigation lights. Radar registered a transient return. Air traffic logs showed no scheduled aircraft. The object moved with steady, deliberate motion before departing. Internal summaries documented it as an unexplained aerial observation. No follow-up, archived and forgotten. 1969, Camp Hero, New York. Radar operators detected an unidentified low-altitude object maneuvering offshore. No transponder. FAA confirmed no authorized flights. The object exhibited controlled changes in direction within a confined area. No visual confirmation obtained. Documented as an unidentified airspace discrepancy. Never resolved. 1959, Thule Air Base, Greenland. Visual observers reported a bright object near the horizon. Radar showed no corresponding contact. Minutes later, radar detected a fast-moving target, but visual observers saw nothing. A mismatch where sensors and human perception diverged. Documented, unresolved, archived. What ties these cases together isn't their resolution, it's their documentation. They exist because someone wrote them down, because radar operators logged timestamps, because security personnel filed reports, because technicians developed film. These weren't headlines. They were routine discrepancies, logged and archived without fanfare. The Black Vault's mission has been to recover these forgotten records, to show that unidentified aerial phenomena were acknowledged internally but rarely discussed publicly. When viewed collectively, these cases form a cumulative record of something persistent, something observed by trained personnel using military equipment, something evaluated according to standard procedures and left unresolved. Tonight, we've examined 10 incidents spanning decades and continents: strategic radar ghosts, airspace violations, optical tracking anomalies, telemetry losses, visual radar mismatches, encounters with nuclear infrastructure, each documented, each archived, each unexplained. The lights have passed, the radar returns have faded, but the records remain, preserved through declassification, accessible through archival recovery, waiting in the Black Vault. They don't provide answers. They never claimed to. They simply record what happened when the unknown crossed paths with the documented world, and both were left staring at each other, separated only by the thickness of a manila folder and the silence of decades.